and this goes back to the first book actually. So take a slight rewind. I wrote The Craving Mind because I had this very naive notion that, with all the research that we'd done over the last decade, and I really was starting to cut my teeth on how to translate science into lay speak without dumbing it down or oversimplifying it. That was something that I found that I love to do. I still love to do it. And that's I write this, I'm writing the Substack weekly newsletter now to really, bring some of these concepts out that people, they might be internet myths or they might be real science that people just don't understand well. And so with The Craving Mind, I wrote that and I was like, okay, here it is. People, they'll figure it out. They know how to do it. And what turned out to be the top review, I don't know if it still is or not. Somebody gave it a 3-star review and said, oh, I've taken some neuroscience classes and, this book's okay, but it doesn't really give me a how to. And I felt like that was a big, kick in the pants or the kick in the balls. And I was like, oh, I thought I wrote this book. So I ended up writing, that was the impetus for writing Unwinding Anxiety, where I was like, okay, here's the pragmatic how to. So 5 years later, basically, I could bring together what I learned in my clinic and how I'd been translating this into our digital therapeutics in ways that were like pragmatic, more closer to cookbook, because there's no such thing as cookbook habit change. You really have to do the work, but you do need to understand how to do it. And the Unwinding Anxiety book helped to solidify the pieces that were accessible for people. And still then, my editor at the time had said, she said, well, hey, I really think people need this for eating because the anxiety book's great and it kind of gives the methodology and gives a basic methodology for any type of habit change, but it doesn't really focus on eating per se. There are some examples in there, but not much. So this is where I said, okay, well, I'll let's jump on this one. Or I shouldn't say jump on it, but really I said, okay, let's see what we can do with eating, because I'd worked with patients who were struggling with eating for over a decade. And we had our Eat Right Now program. We had all this science behind it. And so it was interesting to take, the basic principles that I felt like I'd written about before, especially in Unwinding Anxiety, but really have them be very specific and very focused for eating. And the other thing I played with was, how can we make this a kind of nothing's bulletproof, but a very well marked trail for somebody to follow. So we created, this 21-day program where people can go through it in 21 days, or they can, go through it probably more slowly at their own pace is really how people use the hunger habit. But the idea is to really help people understand and map how their minds work, and then learn to leverage the strength of their minds rather than fighting with themselves. That's a big thing that I see, is this myth of willpower, which has sent so many people down the wrong road inadvertently, because our society is based on willpower. You look at the movies, you look at Weight Watchers, you look at any of these programs that say, the calories in, calories out model works, you're the problem. And so they guilt people into signing on for another year or whatever to their program, instead of teaching them how their brains work and helping them see that they have all the tools they need right there. And so the hunger habit came from kind of honing that craft on how to deliver the science in a way that people could not only access it, but also in a way that people could use it pragmatically and take it step by step. And that's where the hunger habit came from. And this applies to basically any habit, but let's use eating as an example. The way that we learn is through what's called reinforcement learning, meaning that if we find something rewarding, we're going to do it again. And importantly, if we find something that was previously rewarding isn't rewarding anymore, we're going to stop doing it. Now, the important thing that I want to highlight there is the absence of something, which is willpower is not in that equation at all. But critical to that formula for change is awareness. So if we have to be aware when we first do something to see how rewarding it is or how not rewarding it is. I'll give you an example. Let's say that I have a certain reward value in my brain for and this is a real one, a mango habanero truffles. So there's a certain place outside of Seattle called O Chocolates because they are oh so good. And my mother-in-law gives me at the holidays these mango habanero truffles that I absolutely, they're the best. So I have this certain uh, you know, I have a certain reward value set up. I have a certain threshold for, whether I determine something is good or not. It's based on how on these O chocolates. So if I go to a new chocolatier that opens up in my neighborhood and I eat one of their mango habanero truffles and it's like the best ever, I get what's called a positive prediction error where I get this dopamine spritz in my brain and it says, "Hey, remember this place. It's better than O chocolates. Can you believe it?" And on the other hand, which is more likely, if I go and they're just like, meh, they're okay, but they're not as good, I'll get what's called a negative prediction error. I also get a dopamine spritz. I also learn something, but I learn not to go back there because it's not very good. So this applies to eating, and we even did a study on this that we published a couple of years ago, where we had people use our eating program and pay attention as they overate. And it took as few as 10 to 15 times of somebody paying attention as they overate for that reward value to drop below zero. Now, that dropping below zero also helped identify when people started to shift behaviors because when something's not rewarding, you're going to stop doing it. Yet, you have to see that it is not rewarding. If you don't pay attention and you just eat habitually, for example, people that habitually overeat and don't pay attention, that's not going to change. That reward value, that error term, the positive or negative prediction error is not going to happen. So that's critical, not just for eating, but for any type of behavior change. When people worry, if they don't check and ask what they're getting from worrying, they're just going to keep worrying. If they pay attention, the first thing they notice is that it makes them more anxious. And then they start to see, oh, this isn't so great. So it makes it easier to stop worrying. Smoking's the easiest. I had a patient, I think I talked about this in my TED talk, where somebody said, smells like stinky cheese and tastes like chemicals. Yuck, right? There's that negative prediction error. And it is hard to go back from that. You can't unsee or untaste or unsmell what you just, saw, tasted, or smelled. So that negative prediction error is built in as a very powerful learning mechanism. And the only thing that requires is awareness.